We've had a lot of social unrest all over the world, quite frankly, in the past few years. And also in the past month or so, we've seen things heat up a lot. Particularly on September 4th, we had the government of Nepal ordering the shutdown of 26 social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Signal, Snapchat, and I think some others for failing to register under the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology's new rules. So, this move actually triggered an entire kind of situation in Nepal where we had some social unrest. So, essentially what happened is a bunch of young kids kind of came together and they went out and protested because of the government shutting down these social media platforms. And they felt compelled to do this because, well, a lot of their economy and a lot of their livelihood is based upon these social media platforms. And there's specific things like this remittances concept, right? Because, okay, in Nepal, there's not a ton of work opportunities. So young people, what do? They go elsewhere. They go to places like America. They go to Dubai. They go wherever to where they can go and earn money. When they do that, they're going to send their money back home, right? So these are called remittances when you're sending money across borders back home, for instance, to your families. And in this case, a lot of the times they're using social media platforms to get this stuff done. And so what happened here is that a big part of their entire economy, also sometimes like in Mexico as well, like these remittance payments make up a big portion of the entire economy. So there's not necessarily a whole lot of economic activity happening inside the economy, but it's all coming and being imported in through just remittance payments. And so when Nepal shut down all these different platforms because they didn't like register with them because they were trying to, I guess, like force these platforms to, adhere to certain rules essentially, and the platforms just didn't comply in time, they cut off the livelihood of potentially millions of their citizens. So Gen Zers actually went out and protested, and this ended up turning into a deadly situation where I think it was somewhere around like 70 people perished. And there was, like guns being shot. There was police using live ammunition, causing at least 72 deaths and over 2,100 injuries. And throughout all of this, there were parliament and government buildings that were set on fire. And hear me here. This actually forced the prime minister and several other ministers to resign. Okay, so I'll stop there, but that's kind of the meat of the story here. Is a bunch of kids came together to protest the government shutting down these social media platforms and literally kind of overthrew the government.
It's not even just the financial life for a lot of people. Social media is also their only means to connection in their social life, right? So in addition to how they govern a financial world, socially, it's a massive thing. It's how all these kids connect, especially like the younger generation. They grew up on this. This is all they know. This is their going to the park. Like this is how they connect, man. Like I watch my sister use Snapchat and it's like a different world to me. And we're not that far apart in age, but it's like that's how they keep track of their friends exclusively, right? So this stuff happening is only going to continue to lead to that if it ever happens. And I'm in Canada, so we've had nothing that extreme, but I will say that our government, because they've controlled the media here for a very long time, like overtly, like one of our biggest broadcasting stations is owned by the Canadian government, where and we're just all cool with that, which I'm like, that's crazy. Like my nana in particular is like, she voted for the party she voted for under the one main reasons being giving that thing more money. And I'm like, what? That makes zero sense. And she's like, well, we should still have local stories covered. And I'm like, they'll be better covered by independent journalists, 1010%, than this big, massive institution that is incredibly obviously biased. So it happens, and it's only going to increasingly happen. And here in Canada, it's crazy, dude. We can't see news stories on Instagram or Facebook. If we try to go see news, it'll literally just say it's not allowed in your country because of the rules that we have here. So I'll get stuff sent to me all the time, and it will literally just be like, you can't see this.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's a very slippery slope too. I actually made a TikTok about this and where it could go to. And it was actually, I made points similarly alluding to this potentially being a reality where it can get violent, right? Because the excuse of always saying this all the time. They still do. Basically, they say, this is for your own good. You're just too stupid to know this, right? Information has transferred so fast now that we know that's bullshit, right? It was always bullshit, but now we actually know it with some conviction and confidence. And so people like obviously in Nepal are being vocal about that. And it's creating these kinds of situations.
Yeah. So essentially, what this all kind of demonstrates as you say, how it got violent, is this concept called the Streisand effect. And what this is it is an unintended consequence of an attempt to hide, remove, or censor information, where the effort instead increases public awareness of the information that they're trying to suppress.
Mhm.
And so it's not the exact same thing, but it's just kind of an example here of like when you apply that pressure, when you apply that pressure, when you apply that pressure, the only thing that's really going to happen is you're going to have a reaction. And so this is something that we've seen over and over again throughout societies is if a government tries to suppress something, people will actually talk about it more and more. And in this situation as well, because they shut down so many different social media platforms, the government, or rather the kids, were basically using like VPNs to get around some of these bans, as well as like using like, signal types of things. I don't know exactly what apps they were using, but like these privately encrypted apps to be able to communicate with one another and to get their messages across so that they could all meet up and organize. So I just figured I'd throw that in as just a little thing of how this can play out in situations like this.
Completely. No, it's one of those things where that it spreads because it's also inherently interesting and it impacts everybody. So they're gonna want to try to spread the message as much as possible. This is also why we have a massive need for decentralized social media platforms. Like the fact that these are in one hand or in the hands of a few is very very scary because we talked about this in a recurring theme in a bunch of episodes, but everyone is corruptible, right? If they have the means, if there's a potential to be corrupted, people can be corrupted, and so if someone doesn't want something on YouTube and they have enough power, they can make that happen. I've had videos taken down. I've had videos suppressed. I've seen it on many clients' pages. It happens all the time. And people used to say, like, oh, you're being a tinfoil hat, but it's happened enough times where now I think people just generally believe that we're being censored all the time in different ways, in covert ways. Even very recently, this is not totally related, but I think it's timely. I was documenting a 48-hour fast that I was doing on social media, and I got like a bunch of community guidelines for saying that I wasn't eating. And I'm like,
Mm.
the heck? It like, I understand that obviously there is potential risk and danger with something like fasting. That's only risky for you if you have health problems or if you're like super, super skinny. Almost everyone out there has enough fat on them where they could live for days, if not weeks, without food. But yeah, I was getting video taken down after video taken down. Nothing as big of a deal as this, but it just makes you think about how much control they have over what is said versus what isn't. I want to show them the speech of the dude. So for context for people watching this, so this was a very viral speech apparently from a Nepal student who apparently this was the rallying cry. You also got to remember when you're consuming news headlines, when you're not there, it's so easy to paint things in a different light, to make things seem bigger than they were or smaller than they were. It's very all over the place. So you really have to take everything with a grain of salt across the board. But this is apparently the video that really kicked off this movement. So I'll play it here. Keith, let me know if you can hear this.
Yeah.
Hey, I stand here.
So, I'll let him speak. But is Nepal's first language English?
I don't think so. I actually have no idea.
So why would he be speaking English?
It's a good point. There's probably something to that.
Okay, if anyone knows in the comments, please let me know. This guy feels like an asset to me. I don't know, man. Like, what the heck? This seems like someone else's agenda. But let's let him finish.
I am Raut, the head boy of this everlasting Imperial Institute, Holy Well English Secondary School. Welcome to
Okay,
24.
so it's English school.
And being abroad in search of opportunities, we are trapped by the selfish games of political parties. Corruption has woven a web that is extinguishing the light of our futures.
It's got some passion.
Youth, rise! We are the torch bearers of change. If you do not raise our voices, who will? If you do not...
We can wrap it there. But that's Keith. Any first thoughts?
The cadence of all that. I mean, I would have chosen maybe a different approach because is very. It reminds you of a very specific person in history, and I just would have used a different approach to my cadence in the way that I delivered that speech. But, anyways, besides that, you know, I think there's a lot of context to the situation that is also like very hard to have any clue of, unless you've probably been there for quite some time.
Totally.
And the one thing that we haven't mentioned that has been documented or rather reported on is this concept of like they have been feeling as if their government has played into a lot of nepotism and a lot of corruption. And so I think the spirit of this whole conversation was um, okay, so yeah, we kind of left this out. Like the reason that the young people were saying that the government actually shut down these sites was because of them coming out and targeting this nepotism and corruption. And so they were saying that,
Mm.
oh, you guys actually took this stuff down because,
We're exposing it.
yeah, exactly. And not because of this rule that they kind of made up. And maybe it's a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Maybe they made up these rules so that they could stop some of this activity over time or something of that nature. So that was a big part of the narrative here as well. I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, totally. And I agree with you that the delivery, like obviously it's so nuanced in terms of how do you approach that problem, but throughout history, if you don't approach it like that, typically the message doesn't spread. So I get why he was like that, slash why it went so crazy. Again, I was not there. I don't know any of the specifics. There's some comments in the live chat.
We got a correction of their native language. I saw Nepali myself, but then we have Gorkhali as well. Someone said it might have been an auto translation with AI. I think it looked like his
Maybe.
lips were him
It,
speaking
it did,
English.
but AI is pretty dang good, so it's possible. But
Yeah.
it looked to me that looked real. But again, I don't assume anything is fully real unless I've seen it myself.
Which is crazy because it's like, at what point it's only going to get worse, I guess is all I'm going to say there.
I think we're already at that point, though, and I also think that people really need to consider this too. Is that if we talked about this on the last episode, how technology is like decades ahead of what the consumers see. So, have you ever played around with AI video generation tools? They are absurd for what you and I can access for $20. You're telling me the governments don't have better than that? 0% chance of that happening. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, I could be a tinfoil hat wearing so wrong, but all of this stuff would be so easy to manufacture. I'm not saying this is probably 100% real, but I'm just saying I'm always like, who would want me to believe this? Who would want me to think this? And even when I was researching this, a lot of the photos that were in the article I was reading were clearly AI generated. Like I was like,
Mm,
that's not a real picture. So even amidst truth, they will use augmentation tools to enhance the spread of that message, whether good or bad. So I think it's just good to be aware of it and be skeptical and ask questions.
yeah, for sure. I was at a family member's house and they were like, there was this video going on in the background and I was watching it for a while and I was like, wait a minute, like this is AI generated. And I was like asking them if they noticed that and they were like, no way. That looks real to me. And I'm just like, oh man, like we're in
Man,
interesting
we
times.
because we grew up with this stuff, right? And I'm very involved in media every day. You are too. And so we can spot the tiny little differences that give it away, but they are dwindling by the moment here. Like they're getting closer and closer to indistinguishable. I think live media is going to become like the only thing that you can kind of tell. That's why we made this show live, was that you never have to wonder, hopefully, if it was us or not. But they can even make the footage deliberately look kind of bad if they think that's what's going to increase the chances that
Wow.
you like it, right? So
Yeah.
it's endless what they could do to augment the footage to create the aesthetic that they want, which is why you got to really be careful who you give your time and attention to in the first place. But for this in particular, is there anything else specifically that Nepal you want to talk about, or should we expand this out?
I think we can expand it out. Just one thing is Nomel said, my friend owns a company that does the auto translation and it is very good, unfortunately. The lips are
Mm,
always in sync with the language.
thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah,
Fair
no, I
enough.
see them. They're so good, and they're only getting better. It's terrifying, honestly. That's why you need to just have beacons that you trust and honestly consume like more but less. It's a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, and then on the other thing you were saying about like how to, for now, kind of find ways to making sure that you're actually dealing with something real. Yes, live stuff is one way. Uh, Maybe that's debatable too. But then another one was my friend said that he likes to like doing stuff in person at least, and then like having like groups because what can happen is, or right now rather, like AI has a really hard time with dealing with all of these different variables of
Mm,
like real things. Like it can only
totally.
kind of do like one at a time. And so if you've got people interacting with each other, like patting you on the back, like it gets to where it's like really hard to make that look real.
That's a really good point, and I've used AI a lot. I have a client that runs a very large AI show, so I'm seeing firsthand the people who are building it every single week when I'm dealing with my agencies dealing with the content and all this stuff, and so it is pretty crazy what it can do, but you're right, there's some things that at least the stuff that we're seeing, the consumer stuff, that it does struggle with, and even in my profession, like, AI still sucks at what I do because there is so much choice in the matter. It's not math. It's not like this is good, this is bad. It's more of an artistic feel. And AI still very much struggles with that. Again, the stuff that we're seeing. So that's a very good note. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you guys getting involved in the chat. So should we make this more macro now?
Yeah, man, let's zoom out.
Okay, so I think, and this is not a prediction that I want to come true, but I do think that this is going to become fairly normal in the coming months and years because as we've talked about in our second or third episode, where we are in the point in capitalism and with the fiat based system, unless there's a radical change, maybe Trump does execute that crypto reset that you talked about on your channel and that solves these problems. But if things, barring any major change, I think this is going to become increasingly consistent because the feelings that the youth have there is not exclusive to there. It may have been more extreme. It may have been way worse. I don't know the situation. It probably was. But even to my situation here in Canada, at a way lower scale and understanding that we're very privileged here, the youth still feel screwed. They 100% feel screwed. And there's not a lot of sympathy for their situation, which there should be. I think a realistic approach to all of it is what's needed. And I see everybody's stakes involved. I see the older people who say, oh, they're just lazy. And there is some legitimacy to that. I will say that a lot of people in the younger generation, I've employed some of them, they do not solve problems very well, whether that's their fault or they're not. They've been exposed to a problem solver in their pocket 24/7. So they're not very good at critically thinking. It's a skill that they can develop, but they've not been forced to develop out of necessity. And human beings can adapt infinitely, but only under pressure and deliberate exposure, which they've not had to do, right? Like think about the social security blanket that this is. Think about how many times, maybe you had more of this, but me growing up, whenever I had an awkward situation, I couldn't just hide. I couldn't go into this. I was forced to think. I was forced to come up to a conclusion. I was forced to develop my own moral compass. And that was allowed me to think critically for myself. And like my sister, who's 22, she's never had that. And I just asked her the question. I was like, have you ever had a thought that was yours? And she's like, what do you mean by that? I said, everything that you do, everything that I see, when I pay attention to what you're consuming, it's some sort of parroting of that. And that happens endlessly. That happens to us too, which is why you got to be very, very conscious about what you're watching. But to get back to the core point here is that the older generation saying the younger generation is just lazy, that's a lazy response, first of all. Is there some truth that they're lazy? Yes, but people have always been lazy. Why they're pissed is because the lazy person 20, 30 years ago still had a good life,
Right.
right? Like the barrier to entry now is so high. If you're not a killer, you're a loser. That's not fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oof, there's a lot to unpack in a lot of that. So in general, right, like I think we're seeing a lot of political or social, excuse me, social civil unrest. There was a big incident that happened in the United Kingdom not too long ago. Also in France, there was some stuff that was going on. Like, there's always what's happening is like there's one major theme, and we talked about it a couple of episodes ago about how wealth inequality is kind of continuing to increase around the and so with that, like any problem that comes up in between, whether it's directly related to that or maybe not so much, it's going to incite civil unrest. We've got people that are going out and saying, I'm not trying to talk about the politics of it because other than the fact that the economies are messed up is why this is happening. So you got anti-immigration protests, right? Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not saying, but the fact of the
Mhm.
matter is that people are upset and they're going to
Totally.
find reasons, right? When if they can find a reason, it's called an availability heuristic. Okay. So our brains are wired to find a reason for things,
Mhm.
right? Whether they're true or not. And so whatever's available, whatever information is available is the information that I'm going to use to come to my conclusion. And so when there are things that we can point to, or rather that maybe someone else is pointing to, right? Then there's going to be a reaction and we're going to agree and we're going to get all riled up and we're going to organize around that when we know that there's something that's wrong. So, anyways, I think that's really a big part of the source of like why these things are happening. And as you said, unless the wealth inequality situation changes, then this is only going to continue and it can only pretty much get worse. I mean, this was one of the first times in history that we've had such a young group of people, right, going out and actually participating in this type of change.
Mhm.
This is a part of what made this so historic is that it's never really been the young people, the youngest, like we're talking about like high schoolers, going out and doing this kind of activity. So anyways,
And now kids have seen it. Right? Now kids have seen it happen, and from the outsider's perspective, they've seen it be successful. So that now, when these kids would say in their own friend groups before, like, "We should just revolt," like, "Look at what they used to do back in the day," or like Tiananmen Square, or whatever you wanna say, right? But that was back then. We're in a different time now. You can't do that now. They just saw something to the contrary, right? So what's the trickle down effect of that happening? And one point that you made there that was really impactful was the immigration thing. Very prevalent here in Canada. There has been a disgusting situation created now between, in particular, Indian immigrants in Canada, where they are treated horrendously. And it's because our country handled the immigration so poorly, or they either handled it exactly as they intended and they wanted this byproduct, which is totally a possibility, or they were just incredibly negligent and didn't think for 2 seconds, which I think is less likely, that this would happen. But now we're at a point now where it's become socially acceptable in Canada to be racist toward Indians. That's how bad things have gotten. It's messed up, dude. Like, if you go on social media, before people were so worried about getting canceled, and so even if they had a racist thought in their head, they wouldn't comment it on a public forum that's, like, literally just them. People will openly, proudly exclaim that they're racist on Instagram all the time. And I used to go and, like, look and be like, "Oh, is it a burner page?" Nope. Like, these are full on people, just public profiles, their face, their friends, their locations. It's crazy to me. And it's resulted in a situation where I have sympathy for everybody involved with this because objectively, as a kid who grew up in Canada, it used to be awesome here. Okay. Indians aren't the reason that it's no longer awesome, but it's the thing that we can see that changed, like you
Right.
mentioned, right? It's the
Exactly.
thing that we can point to and be like, they must have been the ones who screwed me here. It's like, no, dude, there are so many other things. And I'm sure those people who came here, they weren't forced to assimilate, which is again on our country. Two, they were probably promised so much more than they ended up getting when they came here. And three, it is so unbelievably easy to come to this country. Like, I'm shocked. Whenever I used to get into Ubers, like, a lot of the Uber drivers are immigrants here. And so I would always talk to them. And again, the recurring theme of we're far more similar than we think. Like, they think because they don't really have many friends that aren't the other Indians they came with, they also see that the Canadians are like the source of their problem, that we're super privileged and that we don't have problems. So it's crazy to think that they just thought we were all rich. Again, this is a small sample size. This is like 5 Uber drivers I'm referring to, but like, it was a consistent theme where they just thought that white people must not have any problems because, like, you, right? And I was just like, wow, that's insane how in an echo chamber we are. So even the people who are from here are looking at the Indians and not giving them an opportunity either. And they're really painting everyone with the same brush when that's also not fair, right? In a system where you let in everybody, of course, there's going to be bad actors and they're going to be the most vocal and the most prevalent because they're taking advantage of the flawed system. And then the people who are just here trying to be good people, they get screwed. And then we get more divided. It's a very, very bad situation here.
Yeah. And by the way, the book that I kind of got that availability heuristic thing from is a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel
Hmm.
Kahneman.
Yep.
And it's an incredible read, and it goes into a lot of the different psychological biases that we have and how they impact our decision making.
Totally.
And it's very interesting read. It's a little bit more academic than your typical like psychology front page book, but it's a really good read. So